Hi everyone, welcome to the Paper Sky program. We are piecing block 1 today. I'll be showing you how to paper piece the regular method and the paperless method. Then you can choose which method best suits you. The first block we are making is this little star right here. It consists of 2 fabrics, the background and the star fabric. The first demo that I'm going to show you is how to regular paper piece. That means you'll be sewing on these lines here, these solid lines. And I'm using an opaque paper that is from Martingale. So I'm using this paper here. As you can see, it's for foundation paper piecing. And if you don't have a paper like this, if you have something that is like newsprint or something like that, it should be, you need to have it so that it's easily torn away from the stitching but will still go through a printer or a copier. This diagram over here shows the complete block, and the smaller block here is this template here. This little square here, when you're printing or copying, has to be 1 inch square. This square unfinishes at 5 inches. So if this is 1 inch, this should be 5 inches here. You'll need to make 4 of them. The B here means background. This page here, the next one, are the 3 templates that are required to make the block. You'll notice that they are in reverse. So this goes like this way, and now this side is over here. That is because the wrong side of the paper, or the wrong side of the fabric, will be on the back side of the paper. So you'll need to cut each piece with your fabric right side up. You need to cut 4 of them because you're making 4. Now this probably sounds confusing, but it will make sense when you start to sew. So let's go cut out the templates and the fabric. Okay, now you have the 3 templates cut out, 4 of each. Now, did everybody cut it out of the right fabric? Ask me why I'm asking. I end up cutting 2 out of my background, and I shouldn't have. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stack my fabrics in number order from the bottom up. So 3, 2, and 1. And this is so that I don't get confused when I have a whole bunch of fabrics, as you'll find out in the later blocks that have lots of different fabrics in it, lots of pieces. This way you'll be able to do it in order and you won't have to think about it. The next thing I do is I'm punching a hole with a pin in these intersection points here. And this one here. So that when I fold them over, I'll be able to see where I am. The next thing you can do is either use a postcard type thickness paper, or this is a plastic template sheet. I'm going to lay this on the line and fold it over, press it. Do this on this line here, fold it over and press it. So now I can see what I'm kind of going to be doing when I start putting the fabric together. Okay, so now we're going to start with 1. So take 1. You got to flip it over because remember this is the right side of the fabric pattern now. And I want to make sure that this is about 1/4 of an inch. It can be a little bit bigger because this is the second one you'll be sewing. This one here, you can line it up so that it's 1/4 of an inch about. I'm going to pin it. I don't have my flower head pin, so I'm just using a regular pin. And pin it there. Then the next piece I'm going to use is number 2. So we'll lay it again right side down, wrong side facing up, so that it's in the same shape as your square, as your piece here. Then we're going to flip it over and place it wrong sides or right sides together. Okay. So now, see this line here when you fold it over? Because we folded it, you can see, and you can also see the pinhole there. Okay, so I've kind of lined it up. We can trim this off a little bit later. It's this mark here, it's past here, it's past here. The yellow is past here, so that'll work. Plus, if I put a pin in here, you can see that the fabric is way past the mark there. Plus, if you put it here on the edge of the paper, you can see I got at least 1/4 of an inch on each. So here's my pin. So I got at least 1/4 there and 1/4 there. So that's how you know that your fabric is going to cover your complete square. Took a class that I took with Judy Niemeyer to figure that out. And you can also fold this up, and you can see I've got plenty here that go past the edge of even the paper. So what we're going to do now is pin both pieces. And we're going to stitch on this line between 1 and 2. You want to start off the paper at least 1/4 of an inch, and you want to end past this line here, the intersection line, at least 1/4 of an inch. You should stitch a little bit less. Your stitch length should be a little bit less than what you're used to sewing, and that's so that when you rip the paper off at the end, then your stitches won't come out with it. So I normally sew around 2 1/4, so I'm turning mine down to just below 2. And I stitched all the way off the paper. I'm just going to trim these off here. So you can see I started 1/4 inch beyond, and I stitched all the way off the paper, and I stitched on that line. So now what you can do is remove the paper, or remove the pin. You can trim this up. There we go. And then when you flip the yellow back over, voila, it covers the whole page. Okay, so flip this over. Now I'm going to use a seam, what I call a seam roll. I don't know the exact name of it, but I find it's a lot easier to use. If I was using this, a Hera marker, H-E-R-A, or you can get a point trimmer, then I just do little press downs, and I hold the fabric between my 2 fingers taut so that it doesn't stretch. Because remember, you're working with biases on a lot of this with paper piecing. Okay, so that's done. Got the number 1 and 2. I'm going to move this pin. I'm just going to move it over here. Okay, so the next one we're going to do is number 3. So remember, I put it face down. Make sure you've got it going in the right direction, because if it's screwy like this, then you want to make sure that you got all the corners in the right spot. Okay, so then we're going to tear away a little bit from here. And because we've already folded this edge, you don't need your plastic. But you can trim away 1/4 inch. Or trim away your fabric so that now you've got a 1/4 inch seam. Flip this fabric over this way so that it's now the same shape as the paper that is lined up. Fold it back over. So now we're going to line this up on the under fabrics. They're right sides together. You can look, check it out, see that this under fabric here, the blue, is bigger than this. The blue is, the under fabric is bigger than that, and you've got it lined up there. So for sure, your piece will be big enough. So much easier than the first time I learned how to do this. I was forever taking the pieces apart and having little stitches. It wasn't fun. Now, one of the tricks you have to do is make sure that you hold it carefully and when you take it to the machine, because the fabric is easy shifting. So I'm starting off the paper. I lined my needle up with the line here that I'm going to sew on, and I'm going to sew right on top. And I sewed right off the page. Okay, so now you can pull out both of these pins. Flip it over, and woohoo, it's bigger than the paper. Awesome. Okay, I'll show you with the hair marker. Okay, so you just hold the fabric taut and just do little scrubbings. I don't know what you want to call them. Pressing, scraping. When I get to the end, I go the opposite direction than I was doing before. So now you know that the seam is nice and flat. And we're ready. Now the last thing I like to do is, because this is such a big piece and it'll flop around and stuff like that, these corners are well sewn because you've sewn right through them. And what I'll do is I will baste a big stitch across here, and then that will hold the fabric so that when you're trimming it up, and even when you're sewing the two pieces together, it will be where it's supposed to be and you won't get a nice little wrinkle in there. So basting is as high as you can go. Mine's at a 5. Trim off, and it's done. Okay, you'll notice I'm using yellow in the bobbin and blue on top, and I don't mind doing that because my fabrics are blue and yellow right now, so to me it works. Now what I'll do is I'm going to square up this, but I'm going to only square up the inside to a 1/4 inch. So see, now I can take this off and it doesn't flop anywhere. It stays nice and flat. So now we're going to trim this up. I'm going to line my ruler. So I'm going to trim to the 1/4 inch on the inside here. So I'm putting my 1/4 inch mark right in the corner there. And because this is on a 45, even my 45-degree line lines up good. Put this on the outside, 1/4 inch here on the seam line. That's the dashed line there. And I got my 1/4 inch in the corner. I got my diagonal line here. And I've got the other 1/4 inch on this side on the dashed line here. So now I'm going to trim it up. There we go. And now it's ready. All I have to do now is make the other 3 quadrants. And we'll be ready to sew the block together. Now for making the second quadrant, I'm going to show you the method of using a vellum type paper. And this paper I'm using is by Easy Piece. And if you can get a package, it contains 25 sheets. They're all 8.5 by 11. And that's more than enough to work on this project with. So now first thing to do is I've trimmed around the outside edge, and I'm going to fold over on the line again, just like we did in the first method. So he's there. Fold that over and press, and then line up on the next line here. Oops. Fold that over and press. Okay, you don't have to poke holes in the corners because you can see through the paper. Now I've got, and with this too, you're going to use a glue stick. So, okay, I've got my fabric still 3, 2, 1 laid out. And it's the same as the first method of regular piecing. You want to place your fabric right side down, and it's in the same shape as your piece that you're going to put it here. Now I'm going to line it up about 1/4 inch on this side. Whoop. And 1/4 inch here. And then we're going to pin it. Now this is where you need flathead pins. You can still see through it. I left a little more than 1/4 inch on this because I'll be trimming it down. So put a pin in here. Okay, now we're going to take the second piece, and I want to lay it right side down in the same shape as the section 2 here. So fold this back over, turn this over, and then line up the edges. Fabric's got to stand up here. Fabric's kind of sticking to each other, which is a good thing. Okay, now my second piece, the yellow, is extended beyond the edge here. It's extended beyond the edge there, this line here. And as you can see, it goes past the outside edges here. So we're going to pin this in place as well. Now we're going to sew right along the edge here. Right along the edge here. Don't sew on the paper, sew along the edge. Not to worry if you do catch the paper, because you can just kind of give it a little tug and then it'll separate. Okay, so as you can see, I've sewn right along the edge. Okay, next thing to do is pull out that pin that held it down. Still leave your pin in the first section. And I'm going to use the roller bar. Okay. Now you take your glue stick and just going to dab it here to hold it. Don't need much glue, just enough to hold it. Press firmly. And what I should have done at the beginning was the same thing for number 1. Just do a press so that it will hold as well. But still keep your pin in it. It's just a double caution. Okay, now we're going to work on the third piece. Take your add a quarter ruler. Running out of space here. And then trim right to the edge. So now you have a 1/4 inch seam here. So let's take your third piece, lay it right sides down, and again, whoops, sorry, wrong side down. Lay it on top and just kind of center it on your paper. Okay, so now you can see that I've lined it up here. Let's fix that a little bit. And I flip this up. You can see that I'm over the paper edge there, and I'm over the paper edge there. Okay, so let's pin it in place again. And again, you want to sew right along the edge of the paper there. Remember, if you catch the paper, not to worry, because you can just pull it apart a little bit. I'm also sewing at a little bit less than my regular stitch length, but not quite as small as if I was sewing right on the paper. Okay, so now I've sewn past the paper there, I've sewn on the edge there. Oh, see, I did catch a little bit. So all you do is you just kind of hold the fabric and pull it off a little bit. Now it's free. Okay, so now take the pin out, flatten the paper, then we're going to use, so I'll show you what I do when I use the hair marker. You just do little, whoops, holding the fabric taut, just do little scrapings. You don't want to do a long one because you can easily stretch the fabric. You're working with bias a lot on this paper piecing. So. Just fix that. I had a little bit of a crease there from the seam. Okay, so now it's all done. Again, take your glue stick, Just do a dab to hold it. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to trim on the inside right to the 1/4 inch, and then later I will just trim like it so that it goes beyond, it's a little bit bigger than the required size, just to make it easier to work with a little bit. Okay. So turn this around. I'm lining up the 45° because we know it's a 45° seam line there. And the dot in the middle, I've got the 1/4 inch on the dashed line here. And the dashed line is covered by the 1/4 inch line there. Okay. So I'm going to trim it up. And there we have it. So I've done that. Now what you can also, if you want, trim it right up now to the proper finish size, but I always like to leave a little bit extra because my sewing isn't always that great. So we know it's finished at 5. So I'm going to move it up to like 5 1/8. So I'm lining up the 5 1/8 along here. And you always want to trim the side that's going to be sewn first inside the block. Your outside edges you can trim up later. So trim that up and trim this up. Okay. So that's how I do the method of the paperless paper piecing using a glue stick because I didn't have any of the butcher paper. Now I'll just leave the pin in there just to hold it. If you're going to go on further and using this, then you can just take it off. No worries. It's stuck. The glue will come off. And away we go. Okay. So the next method we're going to use is with the butcher type paper. It has a waxy feel on the back side of it, and it's paper on the front. What I like to do is to print, put this paper, I cut it at 8.5 by 11, and I pressed it lightly to a regular piece of paper, and then run it through the printer. It'll run through like cardstock, and so then you just peel it off. Now normally I don't trim it right down to size, but in this case I did. I leave a little bit of extra. So the same, you want to take the paper and fold down the line. Put it on the line, fold it. Definitely do this because you can't see through this paper. Again, put it on here. Fold it over. And there we have it. And if you want, you can also put a pin in the corners again at the intersection points. And this is so that you can see where your paper will end, where your pattern. Okay, the next thing we take the same way. You take piece number 1, put it right side down, and you want to line it up on the edges. So I've got it kind of a quarter. Now I'm going to pin it. Now I'm going to take it to the ironing board and press it so that it'll stick to the paper. Okay, I've pressed the paper, and what you want to do when you do it is put a pressing cloth over top, because otherwise the graphite from the printer, if you have a laser printer, I'm not sure about an inkjet printer, maybe it'll come off as well. So I just put a piece of fabric over top and I press it. And if you choose, you can press it this way as well with the paper down. But I also put another piece of fabric underneath it so that the lines don't transfer onto my ironing board cover. Okay, so now that's pressed. So what we're going to do is fold this back and take piece number 2. Same thing, you want to lay it out so that the piece is the same right side down. So you lay it out so that the fabric is in the same direction. Then fold this back over, flip this over, and layer on top. Again, just like all the other two, you want to make sure that it goes past. See, here's my line here. You can see the fold. And line it up. Now I'm not going to worry that it's is a little bit beyond there, because we can trim this off after sewing it. So again, you want to stitch right along the line here. Again, your stitch length can be the same as you sew on, or just a teeny bit smaller, but much bigger than you did when you did the paper piece. Okay, so I've stitched along the line here. You can see I've stitched right beside the paper. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take that off. I'm going to trim it up right now. Oh, now you can see I've pulled away the piece here. So all you have to do is kind of readjust. You can adjust it along the seam line here. I'm going to pin it in place again. Okay. There. Okay, so I've got it all adjusted along the seam line. Now we're going to go and press. Okay, so I've repressed it, and as you can see, oh, I can't see it. You can see it kind of lines up here, and in fact I can feel it with my nail, and I run it along that edge there. Okay, so now we're going to go to the third part. It's not a crisis if that happens. Okay, now because I'm short on here, I'm going to take this off again, and I'm going to move it up. I can see where my fold is right here on the line here. So this line here, I can see it right here. So I know that's going to cover it. So let's just make it a 1/4 inch there, so I'll give it here. So hang on to the bottom piece, fold it back over. So if I run my fingernail, because of the fold, it goes right up against here. Oops. Okay, let's do this again. Okay, fold this over, put it right up against the blue there. I can see that this right here, the intersection here, is at least 1/4 inch. Hold this down. Okay, let's pin it. Okay, now I can run my fingernail along the edge. Might want to turn it a little bit. So there we go. I can see it's still there. Pin it in place. This is not the end of the world, ladies. And I still recommend that you try it. Okay, let's go press again. Okay, we're back to where we were before. Fold this back. Now I have about 1/4 inch. Trim it off. And now we'll do the third piece. So this is right side up. It's only the first one that you put right side down first. Okay. So line up the edge. So, and you can see that from here that it goes around the outside edge here. You can take this pin out. Pin the whole thing in place. Okay. Now I'm going to sew right along the edge. Always start a little bit before and stop a little bit after. Okay, sewed right off the edge this time. Okay, so you can see that I have sewn right along the edge. So I'll flip this over. And we're okay removing that. I guess I should have put in a second pin. But because it's pressed on there and sticking, then we're okay. Okay, so gently fold there. Let's use the roller this time. Give it a good thing. Now I'll go to the iron and press it on so it sticks. Okay, I've pressed the 3/3 piece now. And now we're going to trim it. I can take this pin out now because it doesn't flop around anymore. And again, I'm going to trim around the outside or the inside seams. 1/4 inch. Line it up again. It's on the 45 degree here. And the 1/4 inch is on the dashed lines on both sides. We're trimming up the inside seam allowance. There we go. Okay, and this time I'm just going to leave the whole thing open and show you how it works that way. Okay, so now, unlike regular paper piecing where you have to peel off, rip off all the paper after it's all sewn together, in order to do the next section, I can just take it, voila, and do it again. So that's how you do the paperless paper piecing with the butcher paper. Okay, So now I'll just finish the fourth one, and then we'll start putting them together. Okay, I've got the 4 blocks, the 4 quadrants made. One is still got the paper on it, paper pieced. So, and this is the inside here. So I'm lining it up in the middle. This one here, this was the one that was glued. And I've took the paper off there. But these, I did not trim the outside edge. These are the ones that I used the butcher paper with, and they are all trimmed up. Now it's your choice whether you want to trim it up or not. I always like to have it so that the outside edge is a little bigger. Even though the unfinished is 5, I mean, you could trim it up to 5 1/4 or whatever, and then just so it's a little bit bigger than 5. So then for sure, when you put the pieces together, it will for sure be the size it's supposed to be, which is 9 1/2 unfinished. Okay, so I've got these laid out here. I'm going to sew them together. And I will start from the center out. On this, so now you can go back to your regular stitch length, whichever you use. Okay, so that one's done, and that half. Then we'll line this up here. Make sure that your edges match all the way around, or not all the way up, at least on the 2 inside pieces. Now when you start sewing, when you're piecing, leave your needle down, and you sew right to the edge. Sure that your seam lays flat, and you sew right off. Don't stop, and then stick your other piece. Sew right off, because if you don't sew off, then you have a tendency to either have your fabric go this way and make the seam shorter, or go this way and make the seam longer at the end, and that can really muck up your 1/4 inch piecing. Now I use what they call a thread catcher, a thread dog, whatever you want to call it. And I like to put it through. It has to be in long enough or wide enough that you can sew right off, and then clip. Okay, so which is the better way to press? Oops. To go this way. Okay, you can see that the seam is going, oh goodness, that's what happens when I don't use a thread dog. I get the thread all in a nest there. Okay, so you can see at the center that your diagonal seams they're going in all the same direction. Even when let's take some of this off. Okay, so you can see that the seam is pressed towards the larger triangle as well. So what I want to do is that you want to press this seam and this seam so that they go in the same circular direction. So what I'll do, I'll just actually let's use the roller and really give it a good press. Okay. Normally I would take it to the iron, but but this works just as good. Okay, so now the seams are all going, the seams are going in the same direction. And these seams are going in the same direction. See, this folds over there. Let's remove this. I can remove this because the seam has been sewn. You don't ever want to take your paper off until the seams that you need to sew are sewn. If that makes sense. In fact, I can even probably take this off because I've got this paper here. Okay. So you can see all the seams go in a circular direction. Okay, so we'll just pinch them together. And you want to line them up. And you can feel it with your fingers. That they are nesting together. Or else, if you're not sure, then you just poke your pin through there. Okay. It's a little, because there's, okay, so put your pin through there where the intersection is. Wow. There we go. Okay. And you put your pin through here, through the intersection there. Now, I don't have my fork pins. There's pins that you can get. They're called forks, and they just slide in beside each other. What you want to do is hold this up perpendicular. So go straight up and down. You don't want it going this way, or even like to the side. You want it straight up and down. Use a fine pin, and you pin it on each side. There we go. So see, my pin is still straight up and down. Okay. If you want, I'll just use what we call a tack because it's so thick. Pin there. Okay, take this. So the 1/4 inch seam. Try not to sew over your pins, because that's how you break your needles. Okay, let's see how well I did. Oh, not bad. So that's not bad. I'm not doing this for a show or anything. So what I think I will do it. I will guess that my stitching here, or even my trimming on this quadrant only, wasn't very good. So I'm gonna remove this paper. Removing paper, sometimes if you got a lot of it, is kind of like one of those sit in front of the TV and away you go. Oh, and I can even remove my basting seam I had there. Okay, now here's a little trick. So you don't have that bulk in the middle. Sometimes it makes a nice little pimple or mountain or what, mountain peak or whatever you want to call it. What you do is you take your seam and you pull it apart. Just get in there and pull it so that it all lays one way. Okay. Doesn't want to cooperate today. What's going on here? Okay. My goodness. Of course. Well, see, if it worked perfectly, then you'd wonder. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so now you can see you'll be pressing and all the seams will be going in the same direction. And what you see is right side of the fabric in these little box here. And they kind of look like half square triangles in each little quadrant. Take that to your iron and press. And then we'll trim, oh, here's that. And then we'll trim up to the 9.5. And you'll be done. And you want to line it right up on your seams here. So here's 4 3/4 this way, 4 3/4 this way. And, oh, I'm surprised myself. I licked out the line, the 9.5 inch line is on the fabric on both sides. So we're going to trim here. Oh, what another thing you can do is put, because this was a 45 degree, you can put it on, make sure that that seam ends at the 9.5 here and the 9.5 over here. So sometimes it needs a little encouragement, or it could be the way I pressed it, that it didn't come out right. Okay, so that works. 4 3/4 there, 4 3/4 there. So we'll trim this up. And trim this here. So this is cool. You get to spin it. Okay. So we're going to line up the 9.5 inch on the outside edge on both on the cut sides that we've done. There. Diagonal, that lines up in the corner. This is 4 3/4. This is 4 3/4. Woohoo! Awesome. Trim them off. So now we have our 9.5 inch square. So that's block 1 for you. And now you can go ahead and do it. This is correct. You will have, so that it will show your points when you go and sew it on. It was specifically done that way so that your points show. Okay, so that's it for block number 1, and we'll see you in block number 2.